That's right, today we're going to be talking about the brand new Prelude and kind of explain the history of every Prelude that's been out so far. To me, it's really Japan's Mustang. It's not rear-wheel drive, to be fair. It's a big, beefy coupe with a back seat that's not worth a shit, and it's just a fun car. Just a few months ago at the Japan Auto Show, Honda unveiled the 2026 Prelude as a concept car. And the main thing that stuck out to me when they unveiled it is that they're going for a sporty hybrid. And the Prelude has always been about trying new things. So let's go back all the way to the beginning and talk about all the Preludes and all the cool features. The first gen Lude didn't really seem like anything special. It was just an Accord that they shortened about 2 inches and took the back 2 doors off. Still had a back seat, but nobody was fitting back there. It did somehow offer more space than a Ranger back seat. Now this was all the way back in 1978. So as far as power options in this thing, slim to none. It featured a 1.7 liter carbureted engine making about 75 horsepower. 2-speed auto that was more geared towards economy, and then a 5-speed manual. Honestly, it sounds like a pretty boring car. 75 horsepower is nothing, especially if you got the 2-speed auto option. Oh, that is bad. But I kind of think what they were going for was more like a luxury 2-door, closer to a Mercedes SL. And Honda's crack at a Mercedes SL, I think they kind of nailed it. For the time, it had very nice luxury features, including power steering, 4-wheel independent suspension, and a sunroof that was a standard feature, which would stick with the Prelude name throughout its cycle. But it's a Honda, so all you could get was cloth seats. They didn't offer leather seats forever. It was basically just a little sporty car for the average person. Still fit golf clubs, still fit your kids in the back if you really want to. Kind of like a inconvenient daily. While not very impressive, it did plant the seed for the Prelude name. And honestly, these things look sick as fuck when they're built. Stock, they do kind of sit high, and they do have nasty grandma suspension, but these things, there's people, they slam them, think they swap them. After 4 years and 313,000 units of that boring junk, they released the second gen. The second gen was a complete redesign. Aerodynamics was the name of the game for the second gen Prelude. They were so focused on it, in fact, that they custom made an engine that could sit back a little bit instead of sitting straight up to get more ground clearance and keep that hood extremely low. You can't even tell that there's a motor underneath that hood. It's so small. With second gen, they introduced one of their newer How the fuck? Motherfucking apparitions in here? Motherfucking ghosts? Second gen also brought more power with the introduction of the B20A. The B20A is not quite the B series that us Honda people know. It doesn't have VTEC, and it's not exactly the most reliable engine in the world. It was just called a B series. I'm not really sure why. And that was a top-end option. Everything else was kind of the junky old motors making no power, carbureted. I still think they look cool, but I don't know, a lot of people just say they look like an Accord. The most important part is that it was successful. The second gen sold well. That gave the engineering team at Honda a little bit more budget to play with for the third gen. The third gen is probably my favorite of the series. It's looks almost the same. They did change a little bit. It's just a little more sporty is the best way I can describe it. It's a little more smooth. There's the second gen's kind of more boxy. You almost can't tell the difference between them. And the reason it does look more sporty is because they made the hood even lower. And the main way you can tell is because they completely removed the grille from the previous model. So that hood is just sitting down there and it sucks in air from underneath. Outside of the updated looks, we did get one of the coolest things that Honda has ever done. 4-wheel steering. It would be Honda's first ever mechanical 4-wheel steering, having the rear axle tied directly into the steering box. At full lockout, both wheels would kind of turn away from each other to kind of get around corners easier. And then at higher speeds, like highway speeds, they would turn together. And it wasn't speed dependent, it was just how much you turn the wheel. For power plant goes, it's pretty much the same as the second gen. We did get a B21, which was just 100cc more, and all that added was 5 horsepower. Still not really sure why they did that. But the reason I really like this car is because it's like the perfect 80s car to me. It has the boxy look while not being too squared off. It's got the pop-up headlights. It's got the cool push-button interior. It's got the sweet cloth seats. It's just got all these cool little features. The more you look, the more you find. Now I could talk about the 3rd gen Prelude for a long time, but that would be fucking boring. So let's move on to the 4th gen and its release in 1991. The 4th gen was a complete redesign as far as body goes. It's got kind of a catfishy look. I think they look pretty cool. It's got a sweet dash that goes all the way across. It's like super 90s. I love it. This one still had 4-wheel steer, but it was electronically controlled. It got bigger brakes. It was really shaping up to be a sports car now. And to top it off, this is where we finally get a VTEC and a Prelude. And that VTEC would be the H22 model, which was similar to the F22, but it was VTEC. This is where we would get our first big jump to 187 horsepower. That's 47 more than that B21 in the previous model. And if you want me to do a video breaking down VTEC, let me know in the comments down below. I think there's probably a whole video on the history and advancement of VTEC from the beginning to where it is today. Now the one downside of the 4th gen is they got rid of my oh so precious pop-up headlights, and it's because of that stupid pedestrian safety, whatever the hell. It's all crap anyway. Have you seen the new Chevy pickups? They're a brick wall driving down the road at all times. Now on to the 5th gen, coming out in 1996. This is the car that made me fall in love with Hondas. When I was in high school, I always kind of just wrote off Hondas as like the rice boxes and stuff like that, because that's all my friends did to them. They just made them loud and they were all slow. I didn't know how cool these cars actually were until I saw a 5th gen Prelude on the side of the road. In my opinion, it's got like the proportions of an R33, and I just really love the look of it. It's like kind of boxy still, but smoothed out where it matters. Big long hood. It just looks so good. Now the 5th gen, not much change other than the body style. We did lose 4-wheel steering in America. Of course, Japan and Europe got to keep the cool stuff. But they did test out something that's kind of cool. It was called the Active Torque Transfer System. It basically balanced out power to each tire electronically to give you the best performance for cornering, straight line speed, everything. It could add up to 15% more power to the outside tire going around a corner, and these cars already corner good, so I bet this thing really corners good. Unfortunately, this is where the Prelude would begin to peter out, selling only 60,000 models in 5 years. That car that made me fall in love with Hondas is where the end of the road was for the Prelude, until very recently. Been new information coming in all the time, but here's what we know now about the 6th gen Prelude. As far as I know, it's only been showed off at 2 auto shows, but it is so pretty looking. I did want to actually do an independent video on just that car, but there's not really that much details yet. So let's talk about what we know. It is fucking beautiful. To me, it looks kind of like a Audi TT, or I don't want to say an R8, but it's kind of got that body line to it, as well as kind of a Mustang feel to it. It has inlaid door handles. It has tucked in headlights. It's got a bar that goes all the way across the front and the rear. It really frames up the front of the car, because these new round cars, I feel like you kind of lose dimension. Like you see it in Teslas without the grille. They're just kind of nothing. They really did a good job with the lighting on this thing. There's like a little tiny ducktail spoiler on the back too, which is cool. Overall, it's just a really sleek looking car. It is a concept, so who knows how much of that will remain. I'm hoping a good portion of it. Honda has a okay track record with concept cars. As for a power plant, all we know for now is that it's a hybrid. The current theory is that they're going to put the 200 horsepower drivetrain out of the new Accord in it, but it's all theory right now. It is meant to be a little bit smaller than the Accord, so I think even with it being the same motor, it will feel a little more zippy, but I'm really hoping they bump up the power on it, seeing how sleek this car looks. And thanks to the hybrid stuff, they could even go all-wheel drive. Who knows, but that'd be super cool. I mean, this thing would just be a track demon with the hybrid. But yeah, that's it. That's all we know for now on the new Prelude. It started off as a weird version of an Accord that was kind of niche, didn't really have a purpose, but it was kind of sporty, but not really. I don't know. It's a car you could kind of drive every day. It had a back seat, but it also had some really cool first-time technology put into them. From one of the first cars to get anti-lock brakes all the way to four-wheel steering, It was the full spectrum of advancements. You really got to feel like you were part of like a beta testing group every time a new Prelude came out. Now, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I'll leave that up to you. There's a reason we don't see many Preludes around anymore. They're hard to find parts for. They're not very common parts because of all this experimental stuff. But because of their uniqueness, there is a thriving community around these cars. Just one scroll through the forums and you really see people are out there helping each other out. There's people making custom parts. There's people designing parts to organize group buys from just a couple years ago all the way to today. There's whole forum posts, people finding out which cars you can swap parts from, like brakes from an Accord fit on this Prelude. This bushing off of this Civic fits on this Prelude. It is super cool, all of the stuff these communities have cataloged because of the love for these niche little weird sports cars. So if you're one of those guys that likes part searching and really wrenching on a car, making custom parts, making stuff work, a Prelude might be for you. If you're still here, thank you for watching all the way through. I really appreciate it. And if you want to see more car stuff like this and you want to stay up to date on anything that drives, hit that subscribe button.